Why the hell was my older brother Kyle presenting my phone charger design to investors like he invented it himself? I sat in the back of the conference room, supposedly there as his technical assistant, watching him gesture at slides that showed my sketches, my prototypes, my late nights solving the overheating problem that stumped him for months. The investors nodded, impressed. One even called it revolutionary wireless charging technology. Kyle smiled that smug grin I'd seen since we were kids, the one that said he'd gotten away with something again. But this time wasn't like stealing my Halloween candy or claiming credit for my science fair project. This was my future he was stealing, my invention that could change everything. I'd spent 3 years perfecting the wireless charging pad that could power multiple devices without overheating. 3 years of failed prototypes, burned circuits, and sleepless nights in our garage workshop. Kyle had helped with marketing ideas, sure, but the core technology? That was all me. Now he sat at the head of that polished conference table, fielding questions about his breakthrough like he understood quantum induction fields and thermal management systems. I gripped my notebook tighter, the one with all my original designs, and realized something that would change both our lives forever. The whole mess started 2 years ago when I graduated from engineering school with more debt than prospects. Kyle, always the smooth talker, had just started his tech consulting firm called Apex Innovations. He needed someone technical who could actually build things instead of just talking about disrupting markets and synergizing solutions. I needed work and a place to crash while I figured out my next move. Living in Kyle's basement seemed temporary, just until I landed a real engineering job somewhere. The wireless charging project began as my side hobby. Every night after helping Kyle with his clients' basic website problems and database migrations, I'd retreat to the corner of the basement he'd cleared out as my lab. Really just a folding table, some tools, and boxes of electronic components I'd bought with my last student loan money. Kyle would sometimes wander down with beer and pizza, asking what I was working on. I'd explain the technical challenges and show him my progress. He seemed genuinely interested, even helpful with business strategy questions. "You should patent this stuff, Jamie," he'd say. "This could be huge." I trusted him completely. He was my brother, my only family since Mom and Dad died in that car accident 3 years prior. We only had each other. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night in January. I'd been struggling with the heat dissipation problem for months. Every prototype either charged too slowly or overheated after 20 minutes. Physics seemed impossible until I remembered something from my electromagnetics professor about field harmonics. I worked until sunrise, rewiring the induction coils in a spiral pattern that distributed the electromagnetic field more evenly. When I tested the new design, it worked perfectly. 3 devices charging simultaneously at full speed with minimal heat generation. I was so excited I woke up Kyle at 6 in the morning, dragging him downstairs to see the prototype in action. His iPhone, iPad, and wireless earbuds all charge on a single pad no bigger than a dinner plate. Kyle's eyes went wide as he picked up each device, checking the charge levels. "Holy shit, Jamie. This actually works. Like, it really works." He started pacing, running his hands through his hair like he did when his brain was spinning. "Do you realize what this means? Every office, every coffee shop, every airport will want these. We're talking about revolutionizing how people think about charging their devices." I grinned, exhausted but thrilled. Finally, someone understood the magnitude of what I'd created. "We?" I asked. "Of course," Kyle said, gripping my shoulders. "We're partners in this. 50-50 split on everything. But first, we need to protect intellectual property." That's when Kyle suggested we file the patent application together. "It'll be stronger coming from a business entity," he explained, pulling up legal forms on his laptop. "Apex Innovations can hold the patent, and we'll both be listed as inventors. Plus, my company already has the business infrastructure to handle manufacturing partnerships and licensing deals." It made sense at the time. Kyle had experience with contracts and negotiations. I was just an engineer who barely understood how royalty agreements worked. We spent the weekend drafting the patent application, with Kyle handling the legal language while I provided detailed technical specifications and diagrams. The filing fee was expensive, nearly $2,000, but Kyle covered it through his business account. "Investment in our future," he said, raising his coffee mug like a toast. I felt grateful to have a brother who believed in my work enough to invest his own money. The patent attorney Kyle found was professional and thorough, asking detailed questions about the technical innovations and potential applications. I answered everything, explaining the electromagnetic field configurations and thermal management solutions that made my design unique. Kyle mostly stayed quiet during these meetings, taking notes and nodding along. "Your brother's brilliant," the attorney told Kyle after one session. "This technology has serious commercial potential." Kyle beamed with pride, and I felt like we were finally building something meaningful together. 6 months later, the patent was approved. U.S. Patent 10,847,392 for multi-device wireless charging system with advanced thermal management was officially registered to Apex Innovations, with both Kyle Madison and Jamie Madison listed as inventors. Kyle organized a small celebration dinner, just the two of us at that Italian place we'd gone to as kids with our parents. "To the Madison brothers," he said, clinking his wine glass against mine. "And to change the world, one charge device at a time." I should have been happier, but something felt different about Kyle lately. He'd been taking more meetings without me, talking about business strategy and market positioning in ways that seemed to exclude my input. When I asked about his plans for manufacturing the chargers, he'd give vague answers about exploring options and building the right partnerships. Still, seeing our names together on that official patent document filled me with pride. We'd actually done it. My invention was legally protected, and Kyle's business experience would help us turn it into something profitable. That night, I called my college roommate Alex to share the good news. "That's awesome, man," Alex said. "Just make sure you get everything in writing about the profit splits and decision-making authority. Family business can get complicated fast." I laughed it off. Kyle was my brother. What could go wrong? Everything went wrong 3 months later. I came home from a job interview to find Kyle in the basement, packing up my prototype and all my research notes into boxes. "What are you doing?" I asked, confused. Kyle didn't look up from the equipment he was wrapping in bubble plastic. "Moving your stuff upstairs. I need this space for a home office." My stomach dropped. "But this is my lab. All my work is down here." Kyle finally met my eyes, and his expression was cold in a way I'd never seen before. "Jamie, we need to talk. The patent licensing has gotten more complex than I expected. Apex Innovations needs to maintain tighter control over the intellectual property to maximize its commercial potential." He gestured to a stack of papers on my workbench. "I've drawn up a consulting agreement. You'll be paid monthly for your technical contributions, but the business decisions need to be handled by someone with actual management experience." I stared at the contract, my hands shaking as I read the terms. Consulting fee of $2,000 per month. No equity in Apex Innovations. No decision-making authority regarding the patent or any licensing deals. Kyle would have complete control over my invention, and I'd be reduced to a paid consultant on my own creation. "This isn't what we agreed on," I said. "We're supposed to be partners." Kyle shrugged, continuing to pack my equipment. "Business evolves, Jamie. The investors I've been talking to want clear leadership structure and proven management experience. They're not going to fund a startup run by a recent college graduate with no business background." The betrayal hit me like ice water. "Investors? What investors? You never mentioned meeting with investors." Kyle paused, a slight smirk crossing his face. "I've been developing the commercial strategy while you were job hunting. Several venture capital firms are interested in licensing deals, but they need assurance that the technology will be properly managed and marketed." I grabbed the contract, scanning the fine print. The consulting agreement would last only 18 months, after which Apex Innovations would have no obligation to continue paying me anything. Kyle would own my invention forever, and I'd be left with nothing but a temporary consulting fee. "I'm not signing this," I said, dropping the papers. Kyle stopped packing and turned to face me directly. "Then you need to find somewhere else to live. This is my house, Jamie. My business. My reputation is on the line with these investors. If you can't support what's best for the technology we develop together, then maybe we need to go our separate ways." The casual cruelty of it stunned me. This wasn't the brother who'd celebrated our patent approval just 3 months earlier. This was someone who'd planned this betrayal carefully, waiting until I was financially vulnerable and emotionally dependent on his support. I moved out that weekend, crashing on Alex's couch while I figured out my next move. The worst part wasn't losing my lab or even getting kicked out of Kyle's house. The worst part was watching him present my invention to investors like he'd created it himself. Alex showed me the video he found on LinkedIn. Kyle standing in front of a projector displaying my original sketches and prototypes, explaining his breakthrough in electromagnetic field management to a room full of suits with checkbooks. This revolutionary wireless charging technology represents the next evolution in consumer electronics, Kyle said in the video, gesturing confidently at diagrams I'd drawn in my notebook 2 years earlier. Our thermal management system eliminates the overheating problems that have plagued previous wireless charging attempts. Our system. The pronouns made me sick. Kyle fielded technical questions with answers I'd given him during late-night conversations in the basement. When one investor asked about the specific electromagnetic field configurations that made the design unique, Kyle rattled off my explanations almost word for word, like he'd memorized a script. That night, I called the patent attorney who'd helped us file the original application. I need to understand my rights regarding patent 10,847,392, I told him. There was a long pause before he responded. Mr. Madison, I'm actually representing Apex Innovations in ongoing licensing negotiations. There would be a conflict of interest if I provided you with separate counsel. That's when I realized how thoroughly Kyle had outmaneuvered me. Not only had he stolen credit for my invention, but he'd also locked up the legal representation I'd need to fight back. I spent my savings hiring a different patent attorney, Maria Santos, who specialized in intellectual property disputes. Maria reviewed the original patent application and the consulting agreement Kyle had tried to force me to sign. You have a strong case for inventorship, she said after studying my original notebooks and design sketches. The technical contributions are clearly documented, and the timeline shows you developed the core technology independently before your brother's company was involved. But then came the bad news. However, the patent is legally owned by Apex Innovations, and proving inventorship doesn't automatically grant you ownership rights. Patent disputes are expensive and can take years to resolve in court. Maria estimated legal fees could easily reach $50,000, money I didn't have. Even if I won, Kyle's company could still control the licensing and manufacturing of my technology during the lengthy court process. I left Maria's office feeling defeated. Kyle had played this perfectly, using his business knowledge and my family loyalty against me. He knew I couldn't afford a legal battle, especially while trying to start my career and pay back student loans. For 2 months, I watched from the sidelines as Kyle built his reputation on my invention. Then I remembered something from my engineering ethics class about defensive patent strategies. If you can't beat them, become them. I started researching Kyle's business practices, looking for any weakness I could exploit. Apex Innovations was growing fast, landing consulting contracts with major electronics manufacturers interested in wireless charging technology. Kyle had hired 3 new employees and moved into a legitimate office space downtown. But success made him sloppy. I discovered he was licensing my patent to multiple companies without properly tracking the royalty agreements. Some contracts were structured as flat fees, others as percentage-based royalties, and a few were buried within larger consulting deals that made the wireless charging component almost invisible. Kyle was making serious money from my invention, but his record-keeping was a mess. That's when I had an idea that would change everything. I couldn't challenge Kyle's ownership of the patent directly, but I could create a situation where his own success would work against him. I spent 3 weeks developing a comprehensive patent licensing management system, a software platform that could track royalty payments, contract terms, and intellectual property usage across multiple clients and agreements. The system was specifically designed for companies managing complex patent portfolios, exactly what Apex Innovations needed but apparently didn't have. I built the software using my real name and registered it as a separate business entity called Madison Technical Solutions. The beautiful irony was that Kyle's company desperately needed exactly what I was offering. His rapid expansion into patent licensing had created an administrative nightmare that his small team couldn't handle manually. I knew this because I'd been watching his job postings, looking for patent administrators and intellectual property managers. Kyle was struggling to scale his operation effectively. I launched Madison Technical Solutions with a professional website, client testimonials from fake companies I created, and detailed case studies showing how my software could streamline patent licensing operations. The platform looked legitimate because it was legitimate. I'd built genuinely useful software that solved real problems Kyle was facing. Then I did something Kyle would never expect. I applied for a business development position at Apex Innovations using a slightly different version of my name and an address Alex let me borrow. Instead of Jamie Madison, I became J.M. Madison on the application, using my middle name Michael more prominently. I'd grown a beard, started wearing glasses, and changed my hairstyle completely. After 2 years of barely seeing Kyle except during family emergencies, I looked different enough that I hoped he wouldn't immediately recognize me in a professional context. The application was for a remote position managing client relationships and new business development, exactly the kind of role that would give me access to Kyle's licensing agreements and royalty structures. It was a long shot, but Kyle's company was expanding so quickly that he was hiring people based on resume qualifications rather than extensive interviews. The interview was conducted over video call, which worked perfectly for my disguise. I wore different glasses, styled my hair differently, and spoke in a slightly deeper voice than my normal tone. Kyle looked tired and distracted during our 30-minute conversation, clearly rushing through multiple interviews that day. He asked basic questions about business development experience, which I answered using knowledge I'd gained from watching his company's growth and industry research. "JM, your background in technical sales is exactly what we need," Kyle said, barely looking up from his notes. "Our patent licensing division is expanding rapidly, and we need someone who can identify new opportunities and manage client relationships professionally." When he asked about my availability, I mentioned that I was currently transitioning between positions and could start immediately. Kyle nodded approvingly. "That's perfect. We're launching several new licensing partnerships next month, and I need someone who can hit the ground running without extensive training." The interview ended with Kyle offering me a trial period of 3 months, working remotely on commission, plus a small base salary. I accepted immediately, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. After 18 months of watching my brother profit from my invention, I was finally getting inside his operation. The irony was delicious. Kyle had just hired his own brother to help him manage the licensing deals for technology he'd stolen from that same brother. My first week at Apex Innovations revealed the full scope of Kyle's operation. Working remotely gave me access to his client database, contract management system, and financial records for all licensing agreements related to patent 10,847,392. Kyle's company was making tremendous money from my wireless charging technology. He'd licensed the patent to 12 different electronics manufacturers, with deals ranging from simple flat-fee arrangements to complex royalty agreements based on sales volume. The total revenue was staggering. In just 18 months, Kyle had generated over $1.2 million in licensing fees from my invention. Some contracts paid monthly royalties, others made quarterly payments, and a few involved annual lump sums. Kyle had also sub-licensed the technology to 3 consulting firms who were helping their own clients integrate wireless charging into consumer products. But the record-keeping was exactly as messy as I'd suspected. Kyle's team was tracking payments manually using spreadsheets that frequently contained errors. Several clients were behind on their royalty payments, and Kyle hadn't noticed because his monitoring system was so disorganized. 2 companies were using the technology beyond the scope of their licensing agreements, potentially violating the terms and costing Kyle thousands of dollars in lost revenue. This chaos was my opportunity. I started by organizing Kyle's existing licensing agreements into a comprehensive database, documenting every contract detail and payment schedule. Then I discovered several discrepancies that Kyle's team had missed. "Kyle, I found some issues with the wireless charging patent royalties," I reported during our weekly video conference. I'd prepared a detailed presentation showing how 3 clients were underpaying their licensing fees and 2 others had exceeded the usage limits specified in their contracts. Kyle's eyes widened as he reviewed my analysis. "Jesus, JM, how did we miss this? We're talking about potentially $50,000 in lost revenue just from these 5 contracts." I maintained a professional tone while explaining the discrepancies, but inside I was celebrating. Kyle's sloppiness was going to cost him, and I was the one pointing it out. "I'd recommend implementing a more systematic approach to monitoring these agreements," I continued. "I actually know a software company that specializes in patent licensing management, Madison Technical Solutions. They have a platform that could automate most of this tracking and prevent future revenue loss. Kyle leaned forward, interested. Tell me more about this Madison company. Can they handle the volume we're dealing with? I spent 20 minutes explaining how Madison Technical Solutions could streamline his patent licensing operations, reduce administrative overhead, and maximize revenue from intellectual property assets. Kyle was sold before I finished the presentation. Set up a meeting with them immediately, he said. If this software can prevent us from losing money like this, it'll pay for itself within a month. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Kyle had just agreed to hire my software company to manage the licensing deals for my own stolen invention. The next phase required careful preparation. I needed to present Madison Technical Solutions as a legitimate vendor without revealing my connection to J.M. Madison, Kyle's new business development employee. I created a separate professional identity for client meetings, using my full first name Jamie and dressing in business suits instead of the casual clothes I wore for video calls with Kyle. The morning of the presentation, I arrived at Apex Innovation's downtown office for the first time since moving out of Kyle's basement. The company looked successful, with modern furniture, multiple conference rooms, and a team of employees I didn't recognize. Kyle greeted me in the lobby, shaking my hand like we were meeting for the first time. Jamie Madison from Madison Technical Solutions, I said, maintaining eye contact. Thank you for considering our patent licensing management platform. Kyle showed no recognition at all. I'd grown my beard longer, started wearing contact lenses instead of glasses, and gained about 15 pounds of muscle from working out regularly. Plus, Kyle was seeing me in a completely different context than he expected. His estranged brother was supposed to be struggling financially and working entry-level engineering jobs, not running a software company that could solve his business problems. The presentation went perfectly. I demonstrated how Madison Technical Solutions could automate royalty tracking, identify contract violations, and optimize revenue from patent licensing agreements. Kyle was impressed by the software's capabilities, especially the automated reporting features that could flag potential issues before they became expensive problems. This is exactly what we need, he said, reviewing the demo on his laptop. Our current system is completely manual, and we're obviously missing important details that cost us money. I walked him through a customized implementation plan specifically designed for Apex Innovation's patent portfolio. The software would monitor all licensing agreements, track payment schedules, and generate monthly reports showing revenue by client and contract. The initial setup fee is $15,000, I explained, followed by a monthly subscription of $2,000 for full platform access and ongoing support. Kyle didn't hesitate. That's completely reasonable considering how much revenue we're losing to administrative mistakes. When can you start implementation? We agreed on a 2-week timeline for full system deployment. Kyle signed the contract that afternoon, authorizing payment from Apex Innovations to Madison Technical Solutions for patent licensing management services. The irony was perfect. Kyle was now paying me to help him manage the profits from my stolen invention, and he had no idea he was funding both sides of his own exploitation. As J.M. Madison, I would identify opportunities to maximize licensing revenue. As Jamie Madison of Madison Technical Solutions, I would implement systems to capture that revenue more efficiently. Kyle was essentially paying me twice to optimize his theft of my technology. The software implementation gave me complete access to Kyle's financial records and client contracts. Working as both the business development consultant and the software vendor, I could see every aspect of his licensing operation from multiple angles. That's when I discovered something that would change our relationship forever. Kyle had been lying to his clients about the patent ownership structure. Several licensing agreements specifically stated that royalty payments should be distributed among all patent inventors according to their proportional contributions. Kyle had signed these contracts knowing that I was listed as co-inventor on patent 10,847,392, but he'd never mentioned my existence to the clients or set aside any portion of the payments for me. According to the contracts he'd signed, I was legally entitled to receive a percentage of those licensing fees. Kyle had been stealing not just the credit for my invention, but also the money that belonged to me according to his own licensing agreements. 3 companies were paying royalties under contracts that explicitly recognized multiple inventors. Two others had licensing deals that included clauses about equitable compensation for all contributing parties to the patented technology. Kyle had negotiated and signed these agreements personally, understanding their implications, but choosing to keep all the money for himself. This wasn't just family betrayal anymore. This was contractual fraud that I could potentially pursue through legal channels. I spent 2 weeks documenting every instance where Kyle's contracts mentioned inventor compensation or royalty distribution among patent contributors. The evidence was overwhelming. Madison Technical Solutions' patent licensing software had identified over $300,000 in royalty payments that should have been shared with co-inventors according to Kyle's own signed agreements. But instead of immediately pursuing legal action, I decided on a more creative approach. Kyle's clients were paying for access to technology they believed was properly licensed from all relevant patent holders. If they discovered that Kyle had misrepresented the inventor's compensation structure, they might question the validity of their licensing agreements or demand renegotiation of contract terms. I created a comprehensive audit report showing the payment discrepancies and contractual violations, then scheduled a meeting with Kyle to present my findings. Kyle, the patent licensing audit has revealed some potential compliance issues, I said during our video call as J.M. Madison. Several clients have contracts that reference inventor compensation requirements, but the payment distributions don't match the contractual language. Kyle's face went pale as he reviewed my report. He could see immediately that his licensing agreements contained language he'd hoped no one would scrutinize carefully. "What kind of compliance issues are we talking about?" he asked, trying to sound casual. I explained how multiple contracts required royalty sharing among patent inventors, but Apex Innovations appeared to be retaining all payments without distributing inventor compensation as specified in the agreements. This could be problematic if clients audit their licensing arrangements, I continued. They might question whether their contracts are being fulfilled according to the specified terms. Kyle was quiet for a long time, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he asked the question I'd been waiting for. What would you recommend to resolve these compliance issues? I had prepared for this moment carefully. The safest approach would be to establish a formal inventor compensation system that automatically distributes royalty payments according to each contract's requirements. Madison Technical Solutions software can handle this automatically, calculating appropriate payment splits and generating inventor compensation checks monthly. Kyle looked relieved. That sounds like the most professional way to handle it. Can you set up a meeting with Madison Technical Solutions to discuss implementing an inventor compensation system? I scheduled the meeting for the following week, barely containing my excitement. Kyle was about to hire me to create a system that would automatically pay me royalties from my own stolen invention. The inventor compensation feature I'd built into Madison Technical Solutions software was specifically designed for this situation. It would calculate payment distributions based on patent inventorship records and contract requirements, then generate monthly checks to all qualifying inventors. Kyle thought he was solving a compliance problem, but he was actually implementing a system that would redirect a portion of his profits to me permanently. The inventor compensation meeting was my masterpiece of misdirection. Sitting across from Kyle in his conference room, I presented Madison Technical Solutions' automated royalty distribution system like it was a standard business solution. Many patent licensing companies face similar compliance challenges, I explained. Our software integrates with USPTO patent records to identify all inventors on licensed patents, then calculates appropriate compensation based on each contract's specific requirements. Kyle nodded along, focused on protecting himself from potential client audits rather than considering who might benefit from the inventor payments. How does the system determine each inventor's percentage of the royalty distribution? He asked. I pulled up the software interface on my laptop, showing how it cross-referenced patent applications with licensing agreement terms. For patent 10,847,392, the system shows two listed inventors, Kyle Madison and Jamie Madison. Most contracts specify equal distribution among inventors unless otherwise negotiated. Kyle shifted uncomfortably at the mention of my name. Jamie Madison is my estranged brother, he said quietly. We had a falling out over business matters. Is there a way to structure the compensation to account for his limited ongoing involvement in the technology's commercial development? This was the moment I'd been preparing for. The software calculates compensation based on legal patent records and contractual requirements, not ongoing business relationships, I explained. However, you could potentially modify future licensing agreements to specify different distribution structures if all inventors agree in writing. Kyle realized he was trapped by his own signed contracts and patent records. Any attempt to exclude me from inventor compensation would require either my written agreement or renegotiation of existing client contracts, both of which would expose his previous misrepresentation of the patent ownership structure. Let's proceed with implementing the standard inventor compensation system, Kyle said finally. We can address any distribution modifications through separate legal arrangements if necessary. I maintained a professional demeanor while Kyle signed the implementation agreement, but internally I was celebrating the culmination of 18 months of careful planning. Madison Technical Solutions would now manage all patent licensing for Apex Innovations, automatically calculating and distributing inventor royalties according to Kyle's own contractual commitments. The system went live 2 weeks later. On the 15th of the following month, I received my first royalty check as Jamie Madison, co-inventor of patent 10,847,392. The payment was for $14,000, representing my share of licensing fees from 3 major electronics manufacturers. Kyle had no idea that J.M. Madison, his trusted business development consultant, was the same brother he'd betrayed, and Jamie Madison of Madison Technical Solutions was also that same brother. He thought he was paying 3 different people, but all the money was flowing to me through carefully constructed legal arrangements. The monthly royalty checks continued growing as Kyle's licensing operation expanded. By the end of the first year, I was receiving an average of $18,000 per month in inventor compensation, plus my consulting fees from both J.M. Madison's business development work and Madison Technical Solutions software licensing. Kyle's theft of my invention had made him successful, but his success was now directly funding my revenge. The most satisfying part was watching Kyle's frustration during our monthly video calls. These inventor compensation payments are eating into our profit margins, he complained. Is there any way to reduce the distribution percentages? I explained patiently that the royalty splits were determined by his existing contracts and patent records, not by Madison Technical Solutions software preferences. You could renegotiate with clients to modify the inventor compensation clauses, I suggested. But that might raise questions about why the current agreements weren't being honored previously. Kyle never pursued that option, knowing it would expose his previous contractual violations. Instead, he focused on expanding the licensing program to increase total revenue, unaware that every new deal also increased my monthly royalty payments proportionally. After 2 years of receiving inventor compensation, I had earned back all the money Kyle had stolen from me, plus interest, plus ongoing monthly payments that continued growing with his business success. The final twist came when Kyle decided to sell Apex Innovations to a larger technology consulting firm. The acquisition included the entire patent portfolio, client contracts, and licensing agreements that Kyle had built around my stolen invention. During the due diligence process, the acquiring company's lawyers discovered the inventor compensation system and asked detailed questions about patent ownership and royalty obligations. Kyle tried to explain that the inventor payments were temporary consulting fees rather than permanent patent royalties, but Madison Technical Solutions documentation clearly showed the payments were contractually required inventor compensation linked to patent 10,847,392's licensing revenue. The acquiring company's lawyers insisted on reviewing all patent-related contracts and inventor agreements before completing the purchase. That's when Kyle realized his problem had become much bigger than monthly royalty payments. The sale of his company now depended on resolving the intellectual property ownership questions he'd been avoiding for 3 years. Kyle called me as Jamie Madison of Madison Technical Solutions, asking for an emergency meeting to discuss patent licensing complications related to the acquisition. I agreed to meet him the following day, curious to see how he would handle the situation when his carefully constructed lies were about to be exposed by professional lawyers. Kyle looked exhausted when I walked into his office for what would be our final meeting. The acquisition deal was worth $2.8 million, But the buyer's lawyers were demanding clear documentation of all patent ownership and inventor rights before closing. Jamie, I need your help with something sensitive, Kyle said, using my first name for the first time in our professional relationship. The company acquiring Apex Innovations has questions about patent 10,847,392 and the ongoing inventor compensation obligations. I sat down across from him, maintaining the pretense that I didn't know about his personal connection to the patent. What kind of questions are they asking? Kyle rubbed his temples, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. They want confirmation that all inventor royalty obligations will continue after the acquisition, and they need written agreements from all patent inventors acknowledging the transfer of licensing rights. This was the moment Kyle realized he'd trapped himself completely. The acquisition lawyers weren't going to accept vague explanations about estranged family members or complicated business relationships. They needed clear, legally binding agreements from both inventors named on patent 10,847,392. Kyle had to either contact his estranged brother Jamie Madison directly or risk losing the $2.8 million sale of his company. I can put you in touch with Jamie Madison if you need to negotiate an inventor agreement, I offered helpfully. Kyle's face went white when I handed him a business card with my real contact information. Jamie Madison, patent holder and technology consultant. The card read, with the same phone number I'd been using as Madison Technical Solutions owner. Kyle stared at the card for several seconds before looking up at me with growing recognition. You're Jamie Madison. You're my brother. I smiled and removed my glasses, letting him see my face clearly for the first time in 3 years. Hello, Kyle. I believe you have some explaining to do to your acquisition lawyers about patent inventor rights and royalty obligations. The realization hit Kyle like a freight train. His trusted business consultant J.M. Madison was actually his estranged brother Jamie. Madison Technical Solutions, the software company managing his patent licensing, was owned by that same brother. The inventor compensation system that had been paying me monthly royalties was designed and implemented by me to recover my own stolen invention rights. Kyle had spent 3 years unknowingly funding my revenge while I systematically documented his theft and contractual fraud. The acquisition can proceed normally, I told Kyle calmly, as long as the buyer agrees to continue honoring all existing inventor compensation obligations and patent licensing agreements. After all, they're acquiring a very profitable technology portfolio with well-documented inventor rights and automated royalty management systems. Kyle realized he had no choice but to complete the sale with all existing contracts intact, including the inventor compensation system that would continue paying me monthly royalties forever. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's getting everything.